intersection between health and technology, as do all of our panellists. Before I begin, for those of you who don't know me, I'll be facilitating the session for today. I'm precise, so I'm an infectious diseases physician working here at Royal Melbourne. I also work in the refugee health team, and I'm the telehealth clinical lead for Melbourne Health. So without further ado, I will welcome George Margelis to recently taken on the role of Deputy Chief Medical Information Officer with the Connecting Care team, and you'll be meeting some more of the team later this afternoon with the panel. George, I'll introduce you, is a medical practitioner who's been deeply involved in technology for well over 30 years. He first started tinkering with a Sinclair ZX80, which was his first PC, in 1981, and then headed back to medical school at the University of Sydney, which is also my alma mater. Over the years, he's been the Chief Information Officer for a private hospital group, as well as managing a software development team that developed an electronic health record for patients about 10 years before the government developed theirs. And then in the early 2000s, he moved to Intel and Intel GE Innovations. And he has a lot of amusing stories that he can share about his time spent there. Since 2013, he's been Adjunct Associate Professor at the University of Western Sydney with the Telehealth Research and Innovation Laboratory, or THRILL. He's a current member of Ignition Labs, a startup incubator in the health space, as well as taking on a number of advisory roles. Finally, in 2014, he was appointed as IT in the Aged Care Hall of Fame for his work in the use of technology and aged care. So we'll be monitoring the Royal Commission very closely with recommendations. He's also a board member and medical advisor for multicultural care and aged care provider in Sydney. So I welcome George.
Thank you. So Hall of Fame in IT and aged care, I'm not quite sure that means because you're old in IT or whether it's an aged care, I don't quite know that. So like I said, I come from Sydney. My role is I co-convene the CXIO network. And he started off by saying that the CXIO network, the name sucks. It's not a CXIO network, it's a clinical informatics network. You don't have to be the chief to be a member. Everybody who's clinically involved and uses technology should get involved in the CXIO network, because the role of that CXIO network is to drive clinician adoption of technology and also to assist the technology to understand how clinicians work. So, I've come from a medical background. From the audience, how many of you are medicos? Okay, nursing? Other allied health? Who's from the IT department here? Okay, so one person, so we're not going to bag the IT department too much today, we promise, but we'll try and be nice. But the reality is that for the last 35 years that I've sort of been involved in healthcare delivery, you know, there has been a disparity between what the IT department, what the clinical departments want and need. And part of the role of the CXIO network is to get those people talking to each other. Now, to talk to each other, you need to have the same language. Seems simple enough, but when I first got involved in an EMR implementation back in 2001, the IT guys and the clinical guys spoke totally separate languages. And because I had a computer back in 1981, it was determined that I must be the translator, because, hey, you know, I knew how to plug in a PowerPoint. We actually used PowerPoint computer software though, so just literally a PowerPoint. That made you the computer expert. And that was a fun time back in 2001, but the reality is that we've moved a long way since then. We've moved to an era where we are really using the technology to drive clinical workflows. And as a result, we as clinicians are now being exposed to trying to understand our clinical workflows. So if anyone asks a 6th-year medical student, what is a clinical workflow, they'll basically tell you whatever the senior registrar tells me to do is the workflow. And that's a mindset we need to change, because the clinical team involves a lot of people, and understanding the workflow at a detailed level allows us to start doing things around that workflow to optimize it. Optimize it so that our doctors and nurses don't burn out, optimize it so that our patients get the best outcome. And you know, there are the financial controllers of the hospital who want us to optimise cash flow as much as possible. So we need to sort of work on that whole team, how we get that whole team to work together. And let me see if I can get this technology to work. Do I need to... That's me. Okay, so this is the CXIO network. This is an online portal where we, clinicians with informatics, with interest in informatics, can get together and have discussions. Now, to date, a couple of hundred clinicians have joined on board, and we've had some fairly interesting and robust discussions. But call to action number one is join this network, pop your details into the introduce yourself so that people know who you are, what you're interested in. Find peers who have similar interests and start discussions. Because one of the big things we haven't done well in clinical informatics over the years is be actively involved in discussions. Be visible. You need to actually be seen by those above us, those paying for these systems, that we're actively involved in this. Because lack of involvement to them suggests lack of interest. Lack of interest then tells them that we will go and do something else. Hospital administrators, any hospital administrators in the room, I'm about to offend. Hospital administrators get excited by the latest shiny thing. So unless we can highlight to them that what we do at a clinical level with patients using technology is a big shiny thing, then something else is going to grab your attention. I remember back in 2003 when I was working in the private hospital space, and we had a business case put forward for a very simplified electronic medical record for a private hospital. Back in those days, private hospitals had no electronic medical record. There was no business case for it. We put down together a pretty coherent business case for why we should put in a fairly simple electronic medical record to facilitate patient care. And when I took that to the board, they all loved it. And then the surgeons came along and sort of said, I can put in a theatre, and by day 3, that theatre will be cash flow positive, and by the end of the year, that theatre will have paid for itself. And I lost the business case. So you need to be able to understand the conversations in the context of the people you're talking to. When you're talking to your clinical peers, we talk about clinical outcomes, best practice, evidence-based medicine, making sure that we can make this sustainable both at a clinical level and at the patient level. And it's one of those things I'm going to keep on coming back to, but whilst we focus very much on patient-centred care, we need to understand that the providers of that care also need to be looked after. If the system makes their life horrendous, patients will suffer, as will they, and ultimately they actually may become patients. And the last thing you want is a disgruntled doctor as a patient. That's going to really ruin your day. So you want to try and avoid that as much as possible. So you need to think about how we get involved in discussion. And it's really simple as logging onto this. There are some eligibility criteria at the moment. We're limiting to people with a clinical background. So technically you need to be eligible for AHPRA registration. So medical, nursing, physio, most allied health, Chinese medicine is actually eligible for AHPRA. You need to be eligible. You don't necessarily have to have AHPRA registration. We understand that a lot of people involved in the digital health space don't maintain their AHPRA registration because they no longer physically use it to see patients. As long as you're eligible for AHPRA registration, you should be eligible for membership for this. If you think that you should still be eligible despite not meeting that criteria, let us know. We're a pretty open-minded bunch. What we want to do is get people involved in the discussion, because as we get involved in the discussion, it will lead to the next stage. And the next stage, and yes, you're not seeing double. I didn't realise I was going to print one of these up for me just to make my life easier. But it all comes back down to leadership. Now, leadership doesn't just mean being number one. Leadership means taking an active role in all the tasks you do associated with clinical care and digital health in this case. So you may well be the leader of a team of one. Don't think that is not success. Success is being able to use this technology in an effective way so that when you're with a patient, you can hand on your heart say that I use the technology to its best use to help that patient through their journey. If you can do that, then we have success. The clinical leadership. Think about it as your career progresses, and most of you, judging by the lack of grey hair in the audience, are early in your career. You have to maintain leadership roles going through. Think about if you're on a team at night and there's 3 of you, leadership's important. If you're taking a senior executive role, leadership is important. Throughout your clinical careers, a mindset of leadership is important because you're making life and death decisions. That's really important. So, yeah, that's why we're doing this. This is all about changing our culture, not teaching you gadgets. Yeah, you all can learn about the computers that are out there. You'll learn about the EMR that you're using. You'll learn about the ability of a scanner to interoperate with something else. That's all interesting stuff. But the key is that you have a culture of using this stuff to have a good effect. Not just using it because it's mandated, it's part of your requirement, it's in your employment contract. You take the active role of using this technology to improve care. And just in case you didn't know enough about clinical informatics leadership, HealthCXIO is published a white paper. I can highly recommend this white paper. I actually had someone on the plane as I was flicking through it this morning on the way up from Sydney saying, oh, what's that all about? So yeah, you can use this as an information starter. I wouldn't recommend taking it to parties and using it as a start there, but it really is quite a fascinating paper. And we actually spoke to a lot of people around what they want from clinical informatics. And the reality is that this is a nascent industry. This is really early days. Yeah, you guys have the advantage. You're at the very first grand rounds for the HealthCXIO network, and you can put this down in your resume and post it on your Facebook pages tonight. The reality is that this industry is very new. Even though the first EMR, and there's a fantastic video, if you get a chance to go on YouTube, there's a fantastic video of the first EMR implementation in a hospital, maybe about 55 years ago, where they actually used punch cards. It's great when the nurses wore those little pink hats. But the reality is that for the last 50 years, we've just been building some core infrastructure. We're now at that hockey stick point where we're really taking off with using technology in healthcare. So get your hands on the white paper, join HealthCXIO. If you haven't joined HealthCXIO yet, highly recommend it. I first joined HealthCXIO almost 20 years ago now. Haven't missed a hick for 20 years. It's a great way to meet your peers, learn about what's happening, speak to professionals from around the world who are involved in this. And it also teaches you that even though we hear a lot about what's happening in the USA and what's happening in the UK, what's happening in Europe, Australia has been, is, and potentially will always be a thought leader in this space. Electronic medical records in Australia predate most of those in the United States. Even though they're US systems, implementations here started a lot earlier than some of the big US hospitals. So we're actually quite progressed. Now I understand you guys are early in that journey, but it's a fast journey. Once you get on board, put on your skates, you're going to hit pretty fast. But we need to make sure we maintain that leadership, not just in the thought leadership, not just in implementation, but the academic research. So we already have academic research units doing stuff around digital health. We need to maintain that because as clinicians, we need evidence. Just because someone tells us it's a good idea, unless we can actually publish evidence to demonstrate that, then we have to look at it with a grain of salt. We have to think, why am I doing this? And evidence is what makes us points us in the right direction for doing things. Which brings us to the next slide. I was asked to talk about EMR implementation stories. I thought I'd start off with the ugly side of EMR implementation stories, just to give you some hope that implementing an EMR is a hard journey. And the reality is, once you've implemented an EMR, you are at the beginning of your journey. The EMR is the base system for you to build upon. It's like you can't have mobile phones without cellular technology, without the antennas around the place. You can't have digital health without EMR. But an EMR in itself is not digital health. It's the very first stage. It's your single source of truth. It's your way of getting data, electronic. But then comes the journey beyond that. How do you use this EMR for clinical decision support? How do you use this EMR for population health improvement? How do you use this EMR as an educational tool? These are the sort of things we need to think about. These are the sort of discussions we have at the Cio Network. If we drive that agenda, we will have EMRs that provide us with benefit. So you guys will go through these various stages. When they first turn it on, you'll go, oh my God, paper was so much better than this. And then you'll remember how bad paper really was. And then you'll realise, whose bright idea was this? And then Robin will be sort of hitting and signing in the corner. I'm going, it wasn't my idea, someone else told us to do this. And then you'll start bargaining and saying, well, if I don't fill in this part, can I get away with it? How much of this EMR can I cut and paste? Don't. Cut and paste is not designed for EMRs. Each time you interact with the patient, you need to use your brain and input that information into the system. Depression, hey, who hasn't gone through a medical term being depressed about something? But then you come to acceptance. But acceptance isn't just saying, I will use this. Acceptance is saying, I will take this and I will turn this into the most powerful tool this hospital has ever had. I will use this tool to transform the way healthcare is delivered so that when I'm old, which is going to be a lot earlier than you're old, you will look after me in a really effective way. So, everyone has a play in the game here. This is all about providing better care. So you'll go through this stage, live with that, accept the pain. I was at Royal Prince Alfred back in 2000 when we first implemented the electronic medical record, and we all complained viciously about it. And then it went down. In 2003, it went down for 2 days. And we thought the world had come to an end. Because once you've used it, all of a sudden going back to a non-electronic system where tracking someone's pathology needs you to flick through 13 sheets of paper to find out what their liver functions were 3 days ago, it just doesn't work. So you need to get it. The world moves on. You need to drive that change. So that's my contact details. Get in touch with me through the HealthCXIO network. Be passionate. This is all about passion. We get into healthcare not because it's a high-paying job. They lied to us about that one. We get into healthcare because we actually want to make a difference. You want to make a difference, you need to be passionate about making that difference. This is a new tool which 150 years ago, the stethoscope was a new tool and there were people passionate about auscultating lungs. You actually have access now to a new tool. You need to be passionate about using that new tool to drive clinical care and be better at it. Thank you.
Thank you, George. We'll reserve questions till the end. And just a footnote, after this presentation there will be lunch. I believe it's already arrived, but don't run out. It's already there and we'll have lunch after the panel. But next I'll invite Robin Gillies to the floor. So Dr. Robin Gillies has been a member of Royal Melbourne Hospital medical staff for more than 15 years. I've stolen this from another guy. And many of those years have been in anaesthesia and pain management. She has a special interest in information technology and has been the leader in design and implementation of clinical support systems and tools at Royal Melbourne Hospital, including the emergency theatre booking system, wireless patient tracking in the operating suite, and a risk management audit tool for anaesthetists. Robin's passionate about information acquisition, transparency and communication for the purpose of patient safety. And she believes that it's crucial for new technology to be designed and implemented with full stakeholder involvement. Welcome, Robin.
Thanks, HealthCXIO, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. So as HealthCXIO said, I've actually been at the Royal Melbourne for 17 years. And been an anaesthetist for all of that time. And I'm still, so I've been the CMIO here for 18 months, and it's an evolving job. And I also still practice 2.5 days a week in anaesthesia, so I think that's probably at the outset one of the most important things is to maintain your clinical relevance in this role. The reason I took the job, well, I've always wanted to be called chief. And really, as HealthCXIO said, I've been quite passionate about making sure that information is shared properly. So the vision of the Connecting Care program, of which I'm a small part, is to create one world-class EMR shared with patients to support the delivery of safe, high quality and seamless healthcare access across Parkville, and to improve health outcomes for all Victorians. Just a small ask, but we'll get there. For a start, this vision cannot be achieved without clinical change. So you can't wander along and pop in an EMR and say, this is going to fix it, just do everything digitally, the world will be great. The clinical change and cultural change. So we need to change not just from paper to electronics, but actually change the way in which we deal with things. It needs significant ongoing engagement with clinicians, and I guess that's where my role comes in. So the CMIO is very much a part of the team, and there's sort of some experience and skills that I think I'm learning that you need to manage this change. So I guess I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about what the experience and skills are, and it's got very little to do with professional qualifications. So for a start, what's my qualifications for the job? Well, I've been a patient. I've been frustrated by the inability of clinicians to share information. I've been frustrated at seeing what might be the components for a successful treatment and going, wow, that's fantastic, that's available to me, but I know that it's only available to me because I have the medical knowledge to seek out that position. It might not be available to someone else without that medical knowledge, and that makes me quite angry, actually. I've seen in that space as a patient that there is that ultimate need for good communication between clinicians, which is pretty hard to do over the phone, over the internet. It's pretty hard to do if you're not all speaking from the same page, which is, I believe, where EMR comes in. It's like the emojis. Very good anaesthetist. So I'm an anaesthetist, and those qualifications, I guess, make me very process-driven, and pretty decent attention to detail, which I think is probably pretty important in this job. I do a lot of crisis management. There's a little crisis management comes up every day in this job. One of the qualifications is a quick decision-making ability. I'm not sure that that's really helpful in this. But also in my job as a specialist, and I think anybody who's had specialist training understands that at some point they're very accountable, and you need a lot of accountability in this job. I have been a family care coordinator. Everyone in my family takes me along to their doctor interviews and things. I shouldn't need to be there as a translator, but I am, because the system doesn't allow my family to get enough information out about their own treatment. So one of the reasons I took this job was the little sort of bright shiny thing for me is the patient portal. So patients being allowed to access their own medical information and being allowed to interact with their doctor in quite a different way. And I think that will change. That's a huge cultural change that needs to happen. Both here at Melbourne Health, but anywhere in the doctor-patient relationship, and that's that's a cultural change over time, which will need to happen if we are going to have a successful patient portal and patients much more involved in their care, and less need for their families to come along to every interview. So my mum's a CIO, so there were a lot of dinner table conversations about what a CIO is. And my mum actually has no qualifications whatsoever. She started in computers when she was 17 years old with punch cards and various other bits and pieces. But all the way along, she said, I don't need a degree in computer science, I don't need all of these things. What I need is to be able to manage people. So that's, to me, what this job is. It's a management job, it's a change management job, and it's a translator job. Translation between medicine and IT. So the other skills which I sort of learned in medicine, because again, I only have a medical degree, I don't have any other formal informatics training. So some of the other skills which I thought translate to my job, and again, most people in medicine or in the health industry will have these skills as part of their job. So a lot of the job is about relationship management. About being able to communicate with people on their level, and also really to understand their motivations and fears. There's a lot of fear about having to interact with an EMR. There's a lot of fear about losing potential control over the data that they currently have control over. There's a lot of barriers to communication. And there's a lot of dealing with misinformation and unreasonable expectations. So they're all things that I think I've learned over the years as in my clinical role that can be translated reasonably well to this one. The data and analytical skills really come from a research background, so I've gained a bit from research, audit and publications and the time involved in all of those. And so that's been quite useful. And then in my clinical anaesthesia role, sort of the agile approach to problem solving, and also working in a team, because a lot of this is about working in a team. And then you have your sort of immediate team, and then for this project we've got the Melbourne Health team, and then we've got the fully overarching connecting care team, and then there's your team of medical colleagues, there's your team of nursing colleagues, and so you really need to be able to function quite well in a team and understand that you are part of something that's quite big, just a small part. So there's a few works in progress skills that maybe haven't really helped me. My clinical skills haven't really got me there. As far as relationship management goes, there's big difference in different power relationships that occur between clinicians, and that's something that's sort of, could use some extra help on that on some days. But it's a work in progress. It's understanding your own, your own preconceived ideas about different specialties, your own prejudices, and just trying to deal with that in a positive and in a way that you constantly learn without actually mucking things up too badly. Some of the data and analytical stuff that I've learnt just over the last little while is that while everything might be possible, it may not be practical, and it may not even be a very good idea. So I guess one of the examples is, that we have a lot of bespoke systems here at Royal Melbourne, and the EMR can in fact interact and integrate with all of those things. But is that a really good idea? Does that put the information as one source of truth, or does it just sort of help populate everybody's ideas of what they'd like to continue on with? So that's an ongoing issue here. The things that I need to unlearn about anaesthesia in this role is that quick decisions are not always the best decisions. There's a lot of factors in play, and in fact often what you think, you go that's a no-brainer, but we need to do it that way, and then you get all of the information from around the hospital and you go, maybe we don't need to do it that way, maybe we should do it completely the opposite way. I can't be in control all the time. That really frustrates me. In anaesthesia, you're always in control, and so that's something I need to let go of. And the other thing that I had in anaesthesia, and what gives me pleasure on those 2.5 days where I give anaesthetics, is that I get to work, I anaesthetise the patient, they wake up, my job is finished. This is not a job that finishes at the end of the day. So the things that I think probably would be really useful to acquire, and we've started sort of working on this all as a team, is actually some formal skills in change management, because it is very much a cultural and clinical change. There's courses on offer, even one-day courses that at least help you understand the jargon that's used in change management. Just even understanding all the acronyms is quite useful. And it also gives you a bit of a framework as to how to facilitate change. You think, oh yeah, I'll just walk in there and I'll tell them what to do. That kind of doesn't really work very often. And I guess at the end of the day, so you can get very caught up in the day-to-day problems or issues within the EMR, but a skill to acquire and keep on going with is keeping that vision in mind of that world-class healthcare system that's actually a healthcare that's going to assist our patients. One of the things I'm yet to learn is meeting and committee management. As an anaesthetist, you don't go to many meetings, and you're certainly not on many committees. One thing that I will say is the most important: read the papers. When you get to the meeting and everyone says, "So, have you read the minutes?" and you all go, because there's a lot of work that goes into getting those meetings and committees together. At my original when I started in the job, I wanted to be on every committee. I had FOMO, fear of missing out. So I'm letting that go and saying it's okay to delegate. I'm also learning a bit more about how to speak up and say, I really don't understand what you're talking about, because we all use a whole lot of acronyms and things that we're used to using in our day-to-day roles. If I sort of tried to explain an anaesthetic to you in anaesthetic speak, you'd probably just sort of look at me like I'm a space cadet. So I'm learning to speak up even in meetings where I feel like I can't. I am. The other thing that I think that it'd be all useful in this job to have skills in is how to prioritise things and how to do a bit more time and resource management. And there's probably a need to go and do a meditation class after the end of some days. So it is all about the vision. It's this vision to create one world-class EMR, and I think George touched on it. In Australia, I guess we are in a really good position to actually take these wonderful EMRs and take them just that little bit further and make them work for us, or make them work for us and our patients. To use our innovative sort of background to move things forward. So it's not just about sort of managing the status quo, but it's actually having a vision to take us where no US place has gone before. So hopefully that gives you just a little bit of an idea about, basically to me that says anyone can become the CXIO. I'm yet to know whether I'm successful in the job. We'll see how we go with the EMR, and maybe we can not record this. So thanks for listening.
So that brings us to the end of the formal speaking slots, but now I'll be inviting two more guests to join the panel here. Our first guest is Dr. Tim Fazio, who anyone who works for Royal Melbourne will know, because he's the reason why some of our systems are actually really seamless and fun to use. Tim's a specialist physician and certified health informatician, and he's currently working in both clinical and informatics roles here at RMH. Alongside his clinical roles, Tim has also developed iPhone and iPad apps, which have been featured by Apple and mainstream media, and he's also been involved in an e-health startup, which I didn't know, Tim, but I'd like to find out more. And he's also on a variety of community and professional boards. So we'll bring Tim up. Co-Deputy Chief Medical Information Officer. I'll welcome now Christy McKenzie, who is the Melbourne Health Chief Nurse Information Officer and has an extensive background in both management and leadership roles. She also holds a Masters of Public Health, and prior to taking the CNIO role, was the Director of Nursing, Workforce and Professional Practice. And Christy is fortunate to be one of the very few people who are very early on to join the Connecting Care team, so will be a font of knowledge in terms of what's happened from the beginning through till now. And I'll now welcome our first two speakers. Alright, so we can see you. So I might kick things off. Now everybody's welcome to ask questions. I can see some familiar faces, but some people I don't know at all. So you're all most welcome to ask questions, and there will be a roving night during the audience there. But I might just start by asking, one of the things that's apparent to me is that at this stage of the evolution of the CXIO roles, that a lot of the rationale for the roles has actually been bound in EMR implementations. And I know there are people here who are from Bendigo and other sites that are further down the EMR journey, but there is a risk in that. So I'm wanting to know from you, professionally who are now in these CXIO roles, beyond the EMR implementation, what would you see as being your ongoing value add to the organisation?
So I thought you wanted the microphone. I'll start there. if you look at what the role of the CXO has been, and traditionally it was a CMIO before it was a CXIO, it's been around for over 20 years, and really EMRs have only come into play since the great investment in the US EMR system as part of a response to the global financial crisis. That happened around 2009. About $30 billion was given to the US hospitals to ramp up their efforts, and all of a sudden there were CMIOs everywhere. And as part of that, it was primarily an EMR-driven thing, and also a meaningful use thing. For those who know about the US EMRs, a lot of it was driven by a whole bunch of criteria to prove that you're using your software in a meaningful way, which started off with being useful and ended up being quite meaningless in many people's minds. After that, a lot of CMOs felt that their roles would change into much more non-EMR focused work. And I think the most recent survey from this year of CMOs has shown that it's still primarily about EMRs. Although other things like interoperability, clinician burnout, and analytics are becoming more and more common words. I've been lucky here to be employed in an informatics role that isn't EMR driven. I've been really involved with analytics and developing tools for clinicians outside of an EMR to help them look after their patients and use information more wisely and efficiently in the hospital. And when you think about the amount of stuff that we do without an EMR here already in terms of analytics, the potential and the doors that we open by having every single piece of data captured in an EMR is huge. And the need for people who have good data science backgrounds, who have analytics capabilities, to discover new things in health, new ways of doing patient care, real-world evidence, the idea that you can get evidence from your EMR about patients that have come before you and use that to treat patients in front of you now without having published data. There's a huge amount of excitement that an EMR unlocks in my mind. And that's not really about implementation. It's not really about change management. It's about capturing the data and using it and powering through. So I think the EMR will open doors that aren't really EMR related, just give you the data there. But I also think there's a whole new field of research possible using the EMR, what's generating that to fuel research. How do we use EMRs well? What alerts are efficient? What alerts do doctors and nurses and allied health staff just close and should we get rid of? And how we kind of do the phase 2 implementation of business as usual, continual development, being able to be agile and respond to the needs of the clinicians and the patients to make the EMR more and more effective. So I think it unlocks a lot of things, and past implementation, there'll be a whole lot of new roles for us.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just add to Tim's comments, I think that the role of the CXIO or CMIO, CNIO really, I think, is critical during the implementation. But I think that there's a real clear role for these positions really moving forward. I think once we implement and go live with the EMR, we'll start to see, I guess, how we can improve the EMR and optimise it further. So I understand from our colleagues down the road at the Royal Children's, they have about 200 outstanding optimisation requests. So I think that these positions will be key to help prioritise what improvements and how we optimise the system. And really, I think we also need to continually look at the data and how people are using the EMR and I guess, use our leadership skills to encourage them to use it to get the best benefits for our patients and outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that. Obviously, very early on, the EMR is the core part of it. So, back in the beginning of the century, the CIO, there was an acronym around it. CIO meaning career is over, and then it became CMIO, and career in medicine is over. But the reality is that it's a first step. And again, that comes down to driving the discussion about what our role is. So, EMR implementation isn't the end of the journey. The CMIO's role and the CIO's role, and all the clinical informatics roles will significantly expand beyond that. And then you start having to learn things like machine learning and artificial intelligence and what analytics means and how robotics fits into play. And you start to learn a whole new level of science that you haven't touched on in your earlier role. But it's really fascinating time, so go with it.
I think it's important you mentioned that career in medicine is over. There is that ongoing discussion around the tension between maintaining versus relinquishing clinical practice in terms of maintaining your power in your role. How has that tension sort of played out in your respective careers, and how do you manage that, stay or go in clinical practice?
So, back when I first got involved, we ended up leaving clinical medicine because back in the early 2000s, you could not have an ongoing career as an informatician in a hospital. So I worked in a large hospital. There just was no role for an informatician. And as a result, myself, and I can name probably a dozen other doctors back then who had to jump ship and ended up working in industry. Now, working in industry is fascinating. It's not healthcare. Okay? And I'll be a little bit controversial, but we're starting to re-see that cycle again. So some people who have taken senior roles in clinical informatics in the healthcare space are now starting to jump over to industry again. It's sort of deja vu from what happened 20 years ago. You have to be in the system to influence the system. And vendor roles are great. They pay fantastically well. I've got to do that. You get to travel around the world and do some really interesting things, but you're not delivering healthcare. So it's really important to remember that you're healthcare providers who do informatics. You're not IT people who dabble in medicine. So that's my one call to you is stay in the system, maintain clinical relevance, maintain your clinical skills, do what's needed to get you to maintain your registration, see patients, understand it. Otherwise, it is really easy to get swept up by the excitement around the IT industry. Become a chief medical officer at Apple. That would be a fantastic job. But the reality of what you're going to do is make pretty looking iPhones to try to look like a medical device. That's not what you want at the end of your career.
I think that's a good career ending thing. I think it's the day that you step out of clinical practice is the day that you stop understanding what it means to for those clinicians to participate in something like the implementation of an EMR or their ongoing involvement with the clinical informatics. If you step away from that, you get to the point where you don't understand why they can't come to meetings, and you don't have an idea about the patient and interactions that they have on a day-to-day basis that will affect how they respond to change management, even just and you also lose the insight that I think that you need in order to successfully get people engaged and keep them engaged.
Just to add, I mean, obviously I'm in a CNIO role, which is a full-time position as opposed to my medical colleagues who continue to practice clinically and work in the CNIO role. And I would agree with Robin here and George in the sense that I think that you do need to maintain that clinical credibility. I think if you want to continue to influence people in the clinical areas, they need to know that you understand their workflows, their pressures, how things are working today, and you need to be in the clinical area to observe, I guess, what are their challenges and problems so that you can help problem solve and work with them. So in my space, it's been actually actively spending time in the clinical areas, putting back on the scrubs and getting in there and actually observing what's happened and talking with my nursing and other colleagues, which is important.
Completely agree with all of that. I think by being a user of the system as well as a designer, you understand the contextual use. There's a term in user experience about the contextual inquiry. It might work really well in a lab when you haven't got a pager going off, when you're already logged in, when the computer's already turned on rather. But as soon as you're running between two codes, stopping by a ward on a cover shift at 3 a.m, trying to log on to a computer that you don't know where the printer is and what it's called, Gab. The contextual inquiry is really important, and you might design a system completely differently if you know what life is like actually using it. I think part of your question was, what's the tension there? I think there is a big tension because how do I, as a specialist in metabolic diseases, stay up to date with the knowledge if I'm only going to be working 1 clinic a week or 2 clinics a week? And it's something I'm still trying to work out, both how do I stay up to date with informatics knowledge and with medical knowledge when you're trying to split a job 2 ways, or for some of us 3 ways or 4 ways. So it is a tension. I think it's important to keep the clinical role going for all the reasons we've said, but I'm not sure what the answer is to how you do it.
Any questions from the floor? No. Oh, yeah, we have one.
I can probably talk loud enough. In the States, they've developed qualifications, I suppose, or certification for CMIO roles and CNIO roles. Do you think we need to go down that path, or is that not a direction for Australia?
I'll take that one just to start with. I just think in Australia that role is so different depending on which healthcare organisation you're working in. There's a hugely different role implementing an EMR across 4 hospitals versus a small community hospital that needs someone who has that sort of I think it's too big or too diverse a role to say, you can't do this role unless you have this particular qualification. That's my thoughts on that.
I think there'd be, from my perspective, I think there'd be benefit in really developing a clear pathway for clinicians in how they move into these roles and what academic preparation they need. I think given the need we have for these roles, I don't think the workforce is, academically prepared at the moment to meet those credentials, but I think that people, probably the most important thing is, clinical experience, change management and leadership experience, and I think that on the job, they can, I guess, obtain some of those academic qualifications through study, but I do think there is a need to build an academic pathway for clinical informatics and clinical informatics leadership positions. Starting really with foundation clinical informatics in undergraduate courses and then working up through postgraduate study to, master's level. I think we do need to, certainly I've seen CNIOs, they use the analogy, around, it's a bit of a choose your own adventure in how you get here, and no one really has followed the same path, and I think that's largely because people don't know who we are, what we do, and how we get there. So I think some clarity around that would be really beneficial. It would help with how we develop capability within our organisations, and it would help how we support people through career paths, for succession planning and moving into these roles. So
I think mandating it might be too far, but having programs out there is important, and we do have programs out there. So HISA has the Certified Health Implementation Australasia program where you can be certified across 52 competencies in 6 core domains and get a kind of basic understanding of informatics. It's not to say you can code your own version of Epic, but it means you understand what goes into it, what data points are, what budget involves, you understand what HL7 means and what ICD-10 means and those kind of things. AMIO in the US has a 10 by 10 program, which is a relatively short course that gives you kind of 10 different topics. Then you can go into further study. So Archie, one of the co-sponsors of this CXIO forum, has a fellowship that includes a PhD in health informatics. They have membership as well. And then most universities, including the one across the road, have degrees in some form of health informatics. Melbourne University has a Master of Information Systems with a health specialisation, which I've done, and that includes lots of project management, change management, budget types of things, how to plan a project, how to engage stakeholders, how to do change management. You talk about Cotter's 6 steps, and you talk about a DICE evaluation for organisation readiness, but you also talk about how to code, how to build software. And I think there's probably a benefit to understanding a little bit about the IT side of things, just to know what's possible, to know when you're being taken for a ride, to know that really doesn't take 6 months and $200,000 to change something. But you don't need to be the best coder in the country to be a good CXO. It's much more about the soft skills and people management and change management.
So in the US, for doctors, there's actually a board specialty in clinical informatics. It was developed by a guy called Bill Hershey at Oregon Health and Science University. And the concept there was 2 things. One, to provide a way for birds of a feather to stick together and have a cohort of people with a base set of knowledge that can go forward. The other thing was around career progression, because in medicine we're used to very strict career progression paths, and you need to do your Part 1 fellowships for your Part 2s and those sort of things. And what we found in informatics is it was a very vague career path, so people were taking all sorts of routes to get around it. And And the logic was is that you had a central sort of board certification which brought you all to one point, and then you could take disparate careers from there, but at least we knew when everyone had a background. So I think it's important from a career progression perspective because when you speak to young junior doctors, so second, third year out, they're going, do I apply for FRACP? Do I apply for, what do I apply for? You can apply for clinical informatics fellowship as well, and that sort of starts you on a career path. And it also allows you to fill in the paperwork because it's going to ask you, what studies have you done? You can actually put something to recognise. So I think it is important. It's early days for us to develop one locally. I've done a couple of courses, part of that board certification over in the US. I mean, if you get a chance to do them, they're worth doing because you actually do get a chance to meet people, like-minded people, and understand what's happening. But career paths are important because if there's no set career path or no structured career path, it's really easy to just go back and do general practice or physician or whatever training and forget the informatics part of it.
Taking that point, so you've spoken a lot that a lot of the drive is really going to be driven from the academic side because they'll see the imperative and the need for people who want to develop these sorts of skills. But once you actually land in your sort of choose your own adventure role, one of the questions I was interested in hearing from you about is where do you think those organisations, those roles should actually sit in terms of an organisational reporting framework? Because I think until an organisation can actually see, okay, where do you fit in the mix of the things that we're doing, it makes it difficult for people in, work, people in culture to even start to conceive of how do we build a PD for this thing that you're asking for. So, and I know it varies from hospital to hospital, but where do you think these sorts of roles should sit within an organisation sort of reporting structure or framework?
So that's one of the questions that's asked in the annual survey of American CMIOs, and the answers are it varies from hospital to hospital. There's probably about 20-30% report to the CIO, 20-30% report to the CMO, and then there's often a dual role, so either CMO with a dotted line to CIO or vice versa. A few report directly to the CEO, and there's a couple of other interesting options. I think having direct report to CEO might be a good way to go because it gives you the power to make budget decisions, to make executive level decisions, to say, no, I know that for X reason another department wants to do it this way, but as a clinical informatician who's looking after both sides, we need to go that way. I think though, probably at the end of the day, it does depend upon the organisation where the skill sets are. I know in Vanderbilt, for instance, IT reports to the CMO, and it's a complete inverse relationship to what a lot of hospitals will be used to. And as you said, at the end of the day, the hospital is more about health than it is about IT, then why shouldn't IT report to health? I'm not saying we should do that, but there's lots of different structures, and I think they all have their pros and cons, and it probably depends upon where the strengths are in your organisation and in the executive leadership as to where the CMO role should sit.
No, I mean, from a nursing perspective, I think there's a need for it to professionally still report to the executive nursing position in the organisation, and with potentially a dotted line to CIO or that kind of area. So I think I can talk from my mental health kind of context, and I think I think what we're doing is still around clinical transformation, clinical change. So I think that reporting through to our clinical leaders is still important.
I agree that there still needs to be a very good clinical progression of reporting, but also I think it's also interesting to look at where the role of IT is in all of this, and perhaps not the Chief Information Officer, but if we're bringing if we're making it more about health than IT, then maybe IT should be sitting in our clinical units rather than in a separate building, in a separate sort of space, actually bringing IT people into our divisions or our clinical space and saying that's where you operate from, not from a silo in a different part of the hospital. So I guess turning it on its head, should IT people be reporting to the CMIO or or at least to the medical division in which they're charged to work, rather than to an IT director.
I think one of the key things there is to make sure that it is in the organisation chart and it has a line, a real line, not a dotted line, because accountability without the ability to execute gets you in trouble. And what happens when there's a restructure, dotted lines disappear and the position disappears. So you need to sort of very early on work out who it is. So maybe the CMO, maybe it's her. You are reporting to someone and they're reporting and they're having feedback back to you. So that's an important thing. Play the game.
Yeah, we have a question at the back there.
Hi, I'm James. I'm a medical information from RCH. I guess we're at a point now where we're starting to think about expanding our capability in the informatics space, post EMR implementation or during EMR implementation, depending on how you see it. What are your thoughts on how you, rather than choose your own adventure, start choosing other people's adventure for them when we're starting to recruit from a junior medical workforce or a junior clinical workforce space? How do you train them?
Thanks, Rob. I think we probably need to do some thinking with the relevant colleges about how we get accredited positions. It is probably a big thing. I know a lot of junior medical staff are very reluctant to leave their conveyor belt type pathways that are really well set out before them, to take a year off or 2 years off or do a rotation in informatics. I think if hospitals have a designated role, like often as an education officer or an improvement officer, have an informatics officer that junior staff rotate through that's on the program, that's part of a conveyor belt type career, it might make things easier. I think how do we supervise that and train that and support that? Maybe using some of the existing courses out there, get them to do an AMIA type course or a CHIA, or get them to do a subject or two at university, or whether we have in-house informatics informal groups like we have tran rounds, like we have unit audits, like we have unit-based teaching where the registrar presents the topic for 1 hour each week. There's no reason you couldn't do that in informatics. What the role is of a junior medical officer or a junior nursing officer or allied health in a hospital, I think that's a huge role because the end users are generally at the more junior end of the spectrum. It's not the CEO who's going to type notes in ED or to enter medications or do a reconciliation or record the 6-minute walk test. It's more often the junior staff, the junior nurses at the bedside, the junior doctors doing the admissions, charting medications, reviewing the pathology. And so having their input into whether the systems work currently, where they see improvements to be made, I'm sure they've got plenty of ideas of how to fix things and make it better. So I think that will probably be where I'd start the role. And as they progress through their career, they can become more of the management executive types, but on the ground, giving feedback to their day-to-day work as probably a rotation in the first place, but maybe as a whole year or two.
I think one of the difficulties is that it's very early on in your career to decide that I'm going down clinical informatics and therefore, and you don't want to give up your clinical role. So it's trying to find those hybrid positions where you do have a significant clinical role in a unit or a specialty, and then you have your clinical informatics. So we're going to need to look at those half-time roles, I guess, or the job sharing roles where you can be attached meaningfully to a unit and get your clinical experience as well as your informatics. And that's going to be really important to develop, and hopefully, the Children's is in a perfect position to do that. I would have thought to say, okay, well, we'll be the first person to create this role because longevity and how the EMR works in the long term is going to be very dependent on those people.
Yeah, no, recently I was in doing some EPIC training actually in the States and got to visit another hospital, and you really see how they've evolved in terms of their workforce, and certainly most units had a clinical informatics person who worked, alongside clinicians and the units, and really was part of a larger informatics team with informatics leadership. And I think that that's certainly where we'd like to go, and I think that that's a maturity that, journey that Melbourne Health needs to take, certainly. Down. But I think as an interim step, I mean, from a nursing perspective, I think that, looking at opportunities for undergraduates to have, clinical rotations and placements in, things like EMR teams and, telehealth, which has been currently, so that they get exposure to some of the, to digital health and some of the projects we're doing. And I think, through our EMR implementation, identifying those people that do have an informatics interest and actually encouraging them to be, super users or take a key active role in the project so that they can be part of advisory groups or key clinical councils and contribute really to the project. I think they'll get a lot of experience through that, and it also helps identify them in an organisation. So, they're the people that we can work with to really to develop and move through some of these career pathways.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. The one thing I would add is you need to make sure it doesn't become the budge term. It doesn't become the term where they have it easy for a term. So tying it directly to a clinical unit is really important, and actually giving them a required outcome, be that a research paper, be that a publication, something that comes out of that term, which has shown that this is not just 11 weeks where you get a chance to rest after you've done three terms of a term of emergency or whatever. So it's really important to have an outcome related to it. And then, if there's actually a publication associated with it, then that goes on your resume, that goes on your, people know that you're actually doing stuff. So it's really important to have an outcome, not just, come through informatics, play with the computer, work out how to play solitaire on a laptop and move on. So.
Hi, my name's Gab. I'm actually currently occupying one of those roles, 3-month improvement rotation. But I'll be joining the EMR team for next year. I guess one of the areas I'm interested in is kind of junior doctor and I guess nursing well-being and burnout. I think you mentioned that, George. In your experience, how has the EMR kind of impacted that area, and have you done pre-testing and post-testing, and what are the kind of benefits in that space?
My experience in Australia versus my experience in the US. In the US, we've seen a lot of burnout related to EMR because of the way the EMRs are implemented as super duper billing systems capturing everything rather than clinical systems. I haven't seen the same effect here. I mean, at Royal Prince Alfred, we had an EMR back in the early 2000s. Whilst we all sort of hated typing, we got used to typing, and after a while we got out to use our pens. We found that the value obtained by using EMR to make our jobs easier when you're on nights or when you're covering other people sort of compensates for the extra workload. Now, ASMO and all that sort of changed. Like back in my days, we did 32-hour shifts, so things have changed a bit in that regards. But the reality is that used effectively, it's just another tool. And the beauty of our system in Australia is that in the US, they have a whole room set aside where you leave the patient and you go and do your medical record. That's the worst thing possible. You really need to be documenting the site. So I think burnout in the EMR in Australia isn't that big an issue yet. Hopefully it won't be here either. But that's mainly because we're using the parts of the EMR that are clinically relevant, not all the other parts of the stage.
I also think as part of our medical training, culturally, medicine's changing. There's a lot more doctor-patient interaction that's not quite as formal as it used to be. I know when I was getting treatment, I would text my doctor and say, how are my blood tests today, and they'd text back, yeah. And I think that will happen more and more. So we need to perhaps look at teaching people how to manage that, how to manage their time, how to turn off their phones at particular times, how to not be available, and then when they are available, how to do that sort of in a way that doesn't impact every sort of moment of their being. So I think that might contribute to burnout, that sort of that interaction, that constant interaction. So we need to manage that because that is the way that things are changing, I think.
I think in the US it's a huge problem. I think they are measuring it. In that same survey I keep mentioning about what CMOs are measuring, they're measuring burnout of physicians based upon the EMR. I think it's such a big issue that the Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology, whatever it's called, that oversees all the EMRs in the US, has a task force now set up for physician burnout. But as George was saying, I think that's predominantly to do with how we set it up. I'm not sure if you've seen the slides from the Children's Hospital